Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Debra Neal Baker, and this is our first post-serious business spilling tea conversation, and we will be doing this weekly going forward. And today we have, there's a lot of things I could say about our guest today. He's a dear friend, and he's really. I really consider him to be kind of the spiritual guru of our Aveda network, and or the patron saint of our Aveda network. So, so today we're gonna talk about some of the things that everybody's talking about, but then we're probably gonna go a little bit deeper than that. So I want to welcome David Wagner. Hey, so David. Good to be with you. Thank you for giving us your time. It's very generous of you, because I know that you're very busy. And I guess I'd like to, I said, we need to talk about, how do we get more guests? How do we keep our guests during this time? Engaging the team. And I think that talking about how we compete in this omni-channel world that we're now living in. But I'd like to start with you telling our audience just a little bit about yourself and your journey, but then I'd like you to talk about your most recent part of your journey, like the last year and a half, and what that's been like for you.
Oh, great. Well, in 1977, I graduated from high school, and I grew up in a really small town, like a lot of people out there. I was about as far away from the beauty industry as you can get. Never went to a salon until I was 14. But when I was 14, I walked into my aunt took me to this salon, and there was rock and roll music playing and really cool people walking around, and it was like Hollywood to me, right? So from the time I was 14, I decided I was going to be a hairdresser, and I was really fortunate that as soon as I graduated from high school, 2 months later, Horst was opening the Horst Education Center. There was no Aveda at that time. And it was in the old mansion in Minneapolis. So I started in the first class. There were 13 of us. Horst was our instructor. We did yoga from 8:30 in the morning until noon because we didn't have any clients. So it was, it was seat of the pants beauty school. And but it was amazing because we had the best stylists from the Horst salons who were teaching, and Horst was there. And he was cutting hair next door. He was charging $100 a haircut next door. 1977. And it was kind of in a bad part of town. So when I got my first job with Horst, it was parking cars at the mansion. I was the valet guy, and I did it really, really, really well. I did it well enough that Horst noticed and asked me to be his personal assistant. So for the next 6 months, I was like a human Clippy. Horst would work on his clients, and I stood right next to him, and he would section it off and hold the hair up for me to hold. And we have a great video, Debra, that you videoed about a month before he passed of, just reminded me so much of it. But so that was my time with Horst initially. And then I went to Europe for a couple of years. I studied it with Luis Longueras in Barcelona, Jacques Dessange and Bruno Pettini in Paris. And then I went to London. And I came back and started working with Horst again. And I went to work in the St. Paul salon. There were 4 salons at the time, and St. Paul was in last place. I left the mansion to go to Longueras and Rudy Harlow and Sassoon. I come back, and I walked into the last place salon. You ever walked in the last place? Everybody knows what that feels like, right?
Yes.
So you go to a restaurant, and you go, man, they must be in last place.
Yeah.
So I almost walked out, but I decided to stay, and I brought music from Europe and magazines that I got from London, and I started, having soirees and teaching the staff, and I was named the manager of that particular salon. And we went from last place to first place that year, and I was chosen as the manager of the year. And then the vice president resigned to go work for Pillsbury, and Horst said, "We're hiring a new vice president. What do you need?" And I said, well, I would do this and this and this. So a week later, he called me into his office, and he said, okay, you're vice president. I was 23 years old, didn't have a clue. about lease negotiations and workman's compensation, but I knew how to attract great people, inspire them, and get them to care for their clients. So I did that for 3 years, making more money than I ever dreamed of. And then I opened my own salon on Lake and Hennepin in Minneapolis called Salon. I could have opened with a full staff. It was a 16-chair salon. Everybody from Horst wanted to come work with me, but you just don't do that. I didn't want to burn Horst. So I opened with myself and 2 assistants from the school, and we grew from there. All of a sudden, I had 32 people working out of 16 chairs, and we were open from 7 in the morning until 10 at night, working shifts. And it was a blast. It was the funnest salon. And I was looking to expand, and my friend Shivnath, he knew that he was helping me look for locations and let Horst know that I was wanting to expand. So Horst got a hold of me and he said, "You want to open more salons and I need to focus on Aveda. So why don't we merge?" So Horst and I became partners in 1989, and then I bought him out of that partnership a few years later. 1998, I got a call from my friend Yosh Toya. If you're not familiar with Yosh, he's like the Japanese Vidal Sassoon. Really fabulous gentleman, and he was wanting to retire. So we bought his location in Palo Alto, California. So I had Yosh in San Francisco and Horst in Minneapolis, and then Estee Lauder bought Aveda, and nobody knew who owned what. So we decided to change the name. And one of our clients, we did focus groups, and one of our clients said, "I come here to be refilled. I give at work, I give to my friends, my family. I come here to have my bucket filled." So we took the word fill and did a name search, and we found a Japanese word, juten, which literally means to fill. But I liked how it looked aesthetically shorter as jute, J-U-U-T. We did a name search on jute and found that it meant to uplift humanity and serve others. So in 1999, we changed our brand from Yosh and Horst to Jute. And now we have salons here in Minnesota. We have salons in California and in Arizona. And, there's 400 Daymakers. Some of you may know me as the Daymaker, and that story actually came from a show that I did with Neal Corporation. I was down in Dallas doing a show, and I came out, and my model didn't want a lot cut off. So I said, what if I was here to make her day? What if it wasn't about you, but it was about her? And I did this mediocre bob that I got a standing ovation for, because it was the act of beauty that they were recognizing. As soon as the model stood up with this layered bob, she got a standing ovation. We got a standing ovation because of the act of beauty. She was just loving it. So I got on the plane on the way home, and this was 1986. I had REO Speedwagon hair, the big rock and roll, and I was flying first class, and the businessman sitting next to me said, "What do you do?" And I said, "I'm a Daymaker." And he said, "A what?" And I said, "I'm a Daymaker." And he said, "Wow, you must do it really well," because I was flying first class. So I went home and I changed my business card from stylist to Daymaker, and I started handing it out to my clients, and they thought it was so cute. I would go to a party and hand my card out. It said Daymaker. And say, "Yeah, come on in, I'll make your day." It was so cute for about 3 months, right? And then one of my regular clients, who just like clockwork, every 5 weeks came in for a haircut, came in between haircuts just to have her hair done for the night. So I thought she had a special event, and she said, "No, I just want to look good and feel good." And I said, "Wow, that's unbelievable. Let's have fun then," right? So I gave her this great stress relieving treatment and shampoo, and we had a blast for a half hour. And she gave me this great hug when she left. And a few days later, she sent me a gift, and it was a note. And she said, "Thank you for being there without knowing that you were." The reason she wanted to look good was because she was planning on committing suicide that night and chose not to in our half hour. She went home, told her sister what she was doing, and fortunately sent me that note. So it changed my life, because I would have never expected her to be the one, right? She had everything seemed to be going on. So I devoted myself to treating every client as if they were the one. So my 9 o'clock was the one, my 9:30 was the one. And what I found from that was I wasn't expending energy. I was actually harvesting energy. So at the end of the day, by treating it with that much reverence, right? Holding someone that dearly, I was able to walk out at the end of the day after doing 15 clients with more energy than I started with. So that really taught me a lot. So I started doing a lot of teaching or training around being a daymaker. And I was lucky to get on a speaking tour with Deepak Chopra and Wayne Dyer. And people were coming up to me asking for my book. And I'm a high school graduate with a year of beauty school. I didn't know that we wrote books. So I decided to write a book, and I wanted it to be about. I study a lot, I learn a lot, I read a lot, but I'm not a learned person. I'm not a psychologist, so I didn't want it to be about. I didn't want to advise people how they should live. So it was more about how my life as a day maker. I used to have two theories on raising children. Now I have two children. I don't have theories anymore. So that's really what the book is about.
Yeah.
It's my
Yeah.
role as a day maker. So it's day maker dad, day maker husband, so on. And I published that. I self-published that with the guy that does our business cards, and I handed 400 out to my employees for Christmas. And right after Christmas, all of a sudden it just took off, and it took off in the beauty industry. We sold about 60,000 books to salons and different people, and then Deepak's agent got a hold of me because she read it, and we ended up going on a 27-city tour, launching Life as a Daymaker. So now about 1.5 million people have read Life as a Daymaker, and it's published in China and Hong Kong and Taiwan. And they actually call it Life as a Ripple Maker there because Daymaker doesn't translate, but Life as a Ripple Maker, that works too. So I just feel blessed that it's been able to, that simple notion and way of being has affected so many people, including me.
It's such a beautiful story, and and of course I've heard it many times over the years. However, I get reminded by my stepson that it's okay to repeat these meaningful stories. And then, it's really, we always think we're learning, but so much of what we think we're learning, we're just being reminded of what we already know and maybe have forgotten. So I so appreciate you. And I think it's couldn't be more timely, that story right now. So, so bring us up to the last year and a half.
Well, it's interesting. I was focused on Jute was doing extremely well. I brought in Kristen Swanson she was vice president of Aveda. Started with me as my assistant actually at my first salon. And she just had such great experience opening Tokyo and Berlin and Madrid, and then working in marketing with Aveda. So she wanted to stop traveling so much and get back more into the bricks and mortar. So she started with us 2 years ago, and my plan was to still work on Jute, but not so much in it. And my focus was I wanted to create a movie that would uplift the world like my book did. And so my goal was to really focus on this movie project, and all of a sudden COVID hit, and I just, it's inspiring for me to work on the movie, but I got so stuck in wanting to, I shouldn't say stuck. My obligation, my passion became sustaining 400 families at Jute, and just knowing how many people were depending on us, trying to get that right, not only in how to reopen, but how to be closed and still support them. So we had a handful of people that I feel blessed with that really were able to hold Jute together for that first year, and then reopening and just rearranging all the chairs on the deck, because Minnesota here, at first we had 25% capacity, now we're at 50% capacity. So finding hours for everybody and getting over all the PPP stuff and all of that. We do have a salon in Palo Alto, California. That's been closed until 2 weeks ago, and so holding that group. We've got 40 members in Palo Alto that I haven't seen for a year and a half now. So making phone calls to them and Skyping, and staying in touch is so important. So they're back now, but California, where we are in Santa Clara County, is 20% occupancy. So we have 5,500 square feet. There's usually about 80 people in the building, and the most we can have at any given time right now is 20. So it's really created a lot of challenges. But I will tell you that I think people, once we got back to business, there was probably 2 or 3 months of anxiety around, should they change their clothes before they go back into their house and be with their kids. We were washing down all our groceries, the first couple of months and all of that. And as that started to subside and the anxiety or the routine of dealing with COVID at work, we were really fortunate that we haven't seen an outbreak or any transmissions at Jute. It's hard to actually determine that, but we haven't had an outbreak, so to speak. So we feel really fortunate that we're back in business, and thank God for the PPP. The first round kept us in business. The second round, we have over 300 employees, so we didn't benefit from the second round, which was disappointing. So we're really having to look at everything that we're doing and how we're going to be able to sustain going through 2021, and we're confident that we can.
Well, before we get into some of the adjustments or the pivoting that you've had to make, what have been like the major epiphanies, or like what surprised you, or the biggest aha about this pandemic experience?
I think I would say the very small minority of clients that came in that didn't care, argued about their mask. It's a law that we have to have people wear masks at Jute, but it's just so, people come in. We've got a $5 COVID charge that we're charging our clients to make sure that, we're able to do everything that we can. And it's amazing how, 99.9% of the clients are like, yep, keep your employees with benefits, keep them, with full time, because all of those things help. And then, what surprised me was just the selfishness of some individuals. You just go like, really, that surprised me,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
On the flip side, what surprised me was the resilience of everyone at Jute, and just the care. We've become much tighter. There's a challenge in being big as stank small. And all of a sudden we've got, because there's not 50 people in the building at a time, there's 25. Our teams have gotten to know each other more because they're smaller teams. So that's been interesting. And I'm just amazed at how many of our parents with children have been able to navigate these times as well, because, God, I can't imagine, homeschooling and making sure that you're getting enough hours in and all those things. That's pretty impressive that people have been able to do that. One thing that I'm most inspired about for 2021, there was one of our master artists in Palo Alto shared how to manifest your life in 2021. So she wrote a letter to herself for New Year's Eve 2021, looking back at the year, right? And how business was great and how her life, all these things. And it inspired me so much that I wrote a letter to our staff about what 2021 was. So it was Happy New Year, right? And one of the things that I was most proud of was our happiness index. So I'm not sure if you're familiar, but
Yes.
companies, Finland has been the happiest country 3 years in a row now. So it's your general livelihood, your psychological well-being, your financial security, all those things. And Finland is number one for 3 years. So we're actually creating the questions right now that we're going to do a test or a survey basically in March. And then our goal is to increase our happiness index by 30% by the end of the year. And I'm
That
the
is so
chief,
cool.
I'm the chief happiness officer.
Awesome. Of course you are. Of course
What a
you are.
great,
So,
and our team is so excited about it because it's everything that went right, so we're going to be able to figure out where the stressors are. Is it financial security? Is it, do you have a best friend at work? Do you feel included at work? All those things, because that's where happiness comes from. And I think people's whole idea of happiness has shifted so much in 2020 that as we get now into 2021, it's really focusing on what really matters. And so that's what I'm really focused on, is the happiness index at Jute. And it makes
That's
me happy even thinking about
I love that. I love that. So yeah, so then the last year, the pandemic has created this potential to increase our happiness, which is kind of like a paradoxical comment, with thought,
it.
you know.
Yeah.
But it's definitely so. Just so we get down, so we can like some of the changes that you've made. And one of them that comes up for me is like, how are you handling training now? And, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
just one of the questions.
Yeah, that's been really difficult. In fact, we have a training salon called In Toto, and it's a 9-month program where people go from beauty school into the training salon, and it's closed. We just didn't see how we could do hands-on, and it really requires hands-on. So we're doing all kinds of virtual training now, especially with textured hair and working on inclusivity and equality with our services and so on, that was a big aha. That, like, I think that took a lot of us for as a surprise how segregated the beauty industry is. So we're not training new artists as much right now. We haven't hired a new artist in since COVID, and but we're really working on training and educating around texture. And um, now in April, we're going to start with more hands-on related to texture, but it has to be in such a much smaller group. So that's been the most difficult part. I think, everybody's getting more used to learning virtually and training on their own. It's not the same standing behind a mannequin by yourself. There's a saying that practice makes perfect, practice makes permanent, right? So perfect practice makes perfect. And so if you're practicing on a mannequin head, but there's no one there to correct your yoga pose, so to speak, you're just practicing a bad habit. It's like me going to the golf range and driving balls without an instructor. I'm just practicing a bad swing. So that I think the hands-on aspect of it, where you've got enough room and there's enough safety where we can be working on the same head, that's going to be a game changer. And we're hoping to do that in April.
Great. Yeah. So have you noticed, I mean, have you made this textured training kind of mandatory for all the hairdressers to get up to
You know,
speed, or how have you handled that?
Yeah, our goal is that by the end of the year, everybody is. What we are focused on right now is that we specialize. So we have color specialists, stylist specialists, and so on. And we're creating a new specialty called Techspert.
I
And
love that.
we want to have 2 or 3 people in each location that are the Techsperts, but everybody should be able to, if we get a walk-in, everybody should be able to accommodate that guest, and that we're including them. At the same time, if somebody wants to book appointment ahead of time with our best people, they would focus on the Techsperts.
I love that. I love
Yeah,
that because,
yeah.
because I've
So
thought
training,
even, yeah, the
we're training staff.
specialization is, I think,
Yeah,
yeah, because not everyone's going to be great. I mean, we still have hairdressers, and I'm got my salon owner's hat on now. We still have hairdressers that don't do updos and don't do, there's
right.
certain things that they don't do, and
Yeah,
has nothing to do. It really just, they're not good at it. They don't want to learn it. So I was
that's the
wondering
thing.
how we were
For the
handling texture training.
Yeah, I think until, it's interesting because we do texture training, but we don't have a clientele that we get a lot of repetition,
Hmm.
right? So we train, but then you don't get better at it. And I think, a fault of, a lot of salons in our world is that we charge for our time. So it takes twice as long to do a particular textured service, and we charge twice as much, which isn't fair. We're charging for our own inability, right? So
Yeah.
that's not cool. So we're really looking at our menu, our timing, our glossary, all of those things, and it probably 20-30% of the staff are really, really excited about getting to be texperts, and everybody else sees the reason for becoming familiar and comfortable with it. But I think that, uh, until you're doing 4 or 5 a day of a particular thing, like an updo,
Yeah.
I was scared to death of doing updos because I was booked in advance so much that it was hard to get in with me for a Saturday. Um, so I totally understand that. It wasn't that I discriminated against updos. It was just that I was unfamiliar with, how to do it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
did end up I did end up getting good at it though.
Did you? I would
Yeah.
imagine Horst, being with Horst, because he was kind of good at that, that he eventually would have influenced that.
Yeah.
So, what other like big changes have you made in the way you're running your salons and this? You know, I keep hearing all these conversations about what's the new salon business model post pandemic, and I'm curious to get your take on it because of course I have an opinion, and I guess one of the things I see is that right now, if you kind of go below the surface, people are wanting to kind of create their own path. And there's not necessarily one answer, or there's not even two salon business models. Sounds like people are experimenting. And
Yeah, and I think it's important to realize that there's not a right or wrong way to do it, but there is the jute way to do it, right? So there's things that, other salons are doing that are inspiring, but it's not jute. Like for instance, I went to the Shoreham barber shop in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. They're the scumbag barbers, right? And I was so taken by them. I went over on our spring break with my girls. We went to Rotterdam and I got a haircut. And it was amazing. It was the best men's haircut. It was the best barber shop I've ever seen. It was absolutely amazing, but it wasn't jute. There's no way, like if I was going to do a jute barber shop, it would
I
be nothing
we
like
went
that.
we went to that. We did the same thing, Michael and I, when we were in the and they wouldn't let me in the barber
Yeah,
shop.
my
They don't
partner,
let women in the barber shop. I'm like, well, it's a good
yeah,
thing you're over here because that would not fly in the
yeah, yeah,
States. They would not let me in through the threshold of the barber shop.
yeah, yeah. They're doing shots of whiskey and drinking beer at the morning.
Yeah.
But what I learned was how, like a friend of mine was thinking of franchising that, right? That's how, and he went there and he said, can't be franchised because it's so authentic, right? It was so authentic that it can't be duplicated. So what I learned from that was not how to do things. Like we're not going to do that at Jute, but why to be that authentic. Like Daymaking is authentic to Jute, right? And some people are like, it seems so simple and so Pollyannish, if you will, right? But it changes people's lives, and that's what Jute does. So there's not a right or wrong. I look at what's going on now with suite rentals and
Yeah.
sports clips and all the variations of the industry. I learn from them, but and I adopt certain things, but I don't think of things as right or wrong. Horst always used to talk about that was it's not right or wrong, it just is, right?
Right.
So
It's and.
yeah, yeah. Well, I pay attention to what people might be attracted to going to booth rental and its flexibility and so on. But what they miss, like we retain 50% or more of our clients when somebody goes to their own suite. And I think that's true because when you walk into Jute, you're part of this show. It's like a community of, 40 people walking around and there's this energy to it. And you go to a suite and it's just you and the stylist and it's like birds chirping, right? There's no energy aside from the person there. So it's not right or wrong, but it just is not the experience that our Jute clients are used to and experiencing. So then they come back for, the nightclub, version of that, I guess, or
So I'm going to ask the question. So did you lose many hairdressers during this last year? And if you the ones that you did lose, if you did lose some,
Yeah.
where did they go? Did they go to
We,
booth? Did they go to a rental situation?
yeah, I would say, we were surprised. We tried to be conservative and plan on how many people we might lose. And we've been really, really surprised how many people we've been able to accommodate. And, we're being as flexible as we can because of schedules and all of that. We have lost a few to suite rental, more to their commitment to their kids and just staying home during this time. They may be back. We've lost some people that said, I just can't do it right now. But would I be welcome back? And we say, absolutely. We have about 400 employees, and I would say 40 of them are in what we call the boomerang club, where they leave, they find out that's not for them, and then they come back.
Yes.
So they have to
And
leave their
yeah,
way.
yeah.
Welcome
They
them
end up
back.
being they end up being then your most, dedicated.
It's great
It's
because
yeah.
they can sit in the break room and really tell the story the way it is, right?
I know our businesses really can't afford it, but I've often thought it would be great if everybody left to see what was out there and come back, and because that does happen more often than not, or a lot of
Yeah.
times. So there's all these meaningful conversations that have been, we've been having over the last year and a half, whether it was, how people were feeling about the pandemic. We started out with the Me Too movement, and then, Black Lives Matter. And we just which is really, they've all been the catalyst for these conversations that we should have always been having. So
Yeah,
what conversations are you having now that you think are really like at the source of supporting people and even retaining your staff?
well, remember we're in Minnesota, or based in Minnesota, right, where everything was, it was like we're ground zero for the George Floyd uh, wake up call. And in fact, our downtown salon we closed because there's usually 200,000 people on a day in any given day downtown Minneapolis, and now there's about 10,000 people. It's a ghost town. And so we were fortunate that we were able to place everybody out in the salons. But what we found was, uh, what surprised me was how passive I've been about inclusion and the whole, I knew the beauty industry was segregated, but it was like this wake up call of, oh my God, right? Our menu, our pricing, our, people being turned away because there was nobody available. I was embarrassed by it. And so what we found was that, our youngest staff in particular were the most articulate about expressing the need for us to get better. And so we brought in a woke coach. We were working with this woman, fabulous doctor, on inclusion and equity. And we just had conversations. Even during the pandemic, we got together and sat in circle and we talked about our experiences with race and with equity and with justice and things like that. And a lot of tears were shed. And it wasn't so much learning how to do textured hair, it was learning how to talk to each other about racism and prejudice and, all of those things. And, we had book clubs where, these ahas, I thought I was, pretty astute at it. I have a variety of friends and diverse friends and, people that I hang out with, but I didn't understand the history as much as I would have thought. So that learning, 6 months after George Floyd, we were all just, kind of in a company-wide book club and watching videos and movies and then having the conversations and making it okay to express with each other how we were feeling. And I think we're in a really good place. We're doing the IDI measurement where you can measure the inclusion index. We're doing that in April, and I hope that we're going to be able to make more and more strides in doing the textured training. And we have a task force actually that we put together of guest service people, managers, and artists that are focused on the whole focus is on inclusion and equity.
So are you redesigning some of the systems in your salon? And when I'm asking that, I have it seems to me that redesigning systems to address root causes
Right.
kind of
Yeah, I think.
requires co-creation of your people rather than just getting their feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, you can't just throw things at the symptom. You got to go to the cause, right? So part of the cause is like I said, we in our initial training, we bring people to a certain level of working on textured hair. And the challenge has been that then they don't do it for months on end because we're not attracting clientele as diverse as that would indicate. So now we're looking at, if we did a marketing campaign to expand our diversity, we wouldn't be able to fulfill it. So
Right.
it's like cart before the horse, right? So right now we're really focusing on making sure that if a client were to walk in, we're able to accommodate them. That's why I think starting with a few people, getting them really to be texperts, and then letting that emanate out, and where everybody uh, can do that kind of work would be great. But it is getting back to not just the training, but then the images we're showing, the diversity even in who we're hiring. It's not that we don't hire people of color, we're just not attracting people of color because the industry is segregated in that way. So our goal is to not only attract clients of diversity, but more and more employees, leadership, so that when you look at Jute, like it's interesting, Minnesota, people of color make up about 9% of the population. So it's not so diverse that way. But our goal is to be at 20% at Jute. So we're doubling the population. And that when you look at Jute you walk into Jute, you feel like you're welcomed and you feel like, they're like us. So
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting.
Yeah. So I mean, we could talk for on and on. But I do want to bring up this. The world that we live in now. It's how are you navigating the omni-channel world that we're all living in now?
The omni-channel world related to retail, you mean?
Yes.
Well, I think it's interesting that, we were all of our locations are like on Main and Main. We're on corners. And why we did that was way back, Horst, when he did the first Esthétique in New York, I saw the opportunity to be a store. But in order to be a store, we had to create the environment to be a store with a salon behind it. And so we're on Grand and Victoria, we're on Lake and Hennepin, we're on corners, right? And about 5, 6 years ago, we started noticing that we didn't need to be on corners because our walk-in traffic wasn't, it wasn't that important anymore. And they were going online and they were going to the other EC stores and so on. But what we found was that 30% of our clients were buying product. The other seven, what happened to the other seven? So we started focusing less on, the walk-in retail and trying to figure out how can we get to 40%
Yeah. The ones in
tickets
the
with, how
yeah.
can we get, the average ticket. And since the pandemic, I'm happy to say our average retail ticket is up 18%. Amazing. And there's no samples, there's no makeup going on, there's not, but the take-home care, I think people are looking to nurture themselves. So it's interesting. I don't think the walk-in retail, I think, is in the past. I don't see people. It's not a destination for retail anymore. Online is, but I'm happy with Aveda. I mean, we're seeing the affiliation checks, help
Yes.
us. That's very generous. There's not companies that do that or that have the capacity to do that. But it's really up to the hairdresser to make sure that the client that's in their chair is being able to accommodate, what they want at home. So that's where we're focusing our time.
Speaking of the hairdresser and, whether it's recommending product or really being there fully with the client in the chair, what is it that you think, have you seen any breakthroughs, and what is it you think is the barrier to hairdressers, certain hairdressers, and I don't know what the percentage is, that you really have to prod to do what they could and should do? What do you think is underneath that?
I think we're our whole focus on education, aside from the texture care, is getting back to the wheel, to the time wheel, and making sure that we're really hitting all of those points and the importance of it. And I think it's training, all of the advanced training is just mastering the basics. So, the consultation, the shampoo, the stress relieving treatment, all of those things should get better. There's a quote that we've been using this year in particular as of the first of the year, and I got it from Yosh 21 years ago. He had a great quote, and it's, we'll be better today than yesterday, better tomorrow than today. If a client is coming in, she's been seeing you for 5 years and comes in 5 weeks, your haircut better be better this time. If the haircut's the same, then the experience better be better. And if you do a stress relieving treatment, a kick-ass stress relieving treatment last time, guess what? You got to up it this time. It's like I've got it here, actually sitting here. I gave this to my wife for our first anniversary, right? I wrote her a poem and put it on this shitty little picture frame that I got for $2.99 of a little boy and a little girl sitting on the beach. So our second anniversary, like, I have to keep doing better than this. Yeah. And I think that's what's interesting about, our staff sometimes take for granted that it's their client and the relationship is sound. Well, everybody is looking for better. And I think it's so important that we're better tomorrow than today. And that means, whatever you were good at, it better be even better, 5 weeks from now. So it's just reminding people not to take that for granted. I think, even with image, I would say one of our focuses going into spring now is that our dress code really got laxed because, people are spraying disinfectant down and washing their stuff so much and all of that. But it's gotten to the point now, like, we've been open for a long enough time that we can get back to inspiring our client with
your own personal image.
Yeah. And I think that's, the same thing with services. Clients were just glad to be back, and now they've been glad to be back 3 or 4 times, and they're looking for what it was like before, when there were more suggestions on, what's next, and getting something new and how to inspire them and so on and so forth. So it's not just welcoming them and, oh God, how are you doing and all of that. Now we're in a phase where it's kind of getting back to, how do you want to be? How do you want to look? What would inspire you? What's your edge? Are you ready for a change? And I think there's too many people that are taking that for granted, that people are just so happy to be in that it doesn't matter what they get. And I think it's the opposite now. I think
I think that we're all very ripe and ready and open for kind of some radical transformation, and including our physical, transformation.
Yeah, and I had a great conversation with one of our master colorists, and she was indicating that, when we reopened, so many people had let their gray grow out. So the first 4 or 5 months was helping them go gray. Mm-hmm. But the more gray people have gotten, now we're seeing it shift back the other way, that they're feeling old.
Yeah.
And, so it was intriguing because it was in the press and Jane Fonda and whatever, but now all of a sudden they're seeing themselves, on a Skype call or a Zoom call, or having to go in the office, and they want to go back to being, inspiring themselves with their beauty and their aesthetics. So I think we're going to see a shift in that as well.
Yeah, but at the same time, there's a lot of conversation and training going on around the whole, what they're calling the silver transition, and those services. And again, it's kind of like our conversation about the texture. and specializing.
Yeah.
Because that is, we're departmentalized too. And that takes a high level of skill and experience and, training. So that's another service that we could add to because there's always going to be enough people like me who I went gray, and I did that whole 8-hour gray transition, which I have never felt so liberated. And I think there's a huge amount of people out there that want that. And as you said, there's also people that go there and they're like, oh.
Yeah, once they go there, that's old, right?
Yeah.
So then, the longer they've had it, the more we're seeing that they're starting to add back in highlights or lowlights or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And some are staying, some are staying that way, which is
right,
good too.
Right. So I know we probably need to start to kind of wrap it up. And I'm a journaler. I think all the time and, writing down, what could I ask? And I guess one of the things that I know that it's necessary and important that we all stay really informed on government mandates, the latest pandemic related news. And yet I think we're all ready to talk about other things. And, even, like, what books are you reading?
Right.
What books are you reading?
I just subscribed yesterday to Blinkist. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. It's great books, nonfiction books that are basically 20-minute summaries. So it's
I love that.
when you were doing, what was it, EdEdge?
When we did EdEdge, yes.
Yeah. So it's similar to that. So then if you have an interest topic, so it's a 20-minute deep dive into the book, and then you can decide if you're going to spend. I read Leonard Lauder's book, was totally inspiring. I thought I knew the story behind the story, but it was so inspiring. I absolutely loved it. Matthew McConaughey's
everybody that I still need, that's on my list. So what did you? I've heard such high compliments about that book.
Well, I think it's like Life as a Daymaker. It's his story. It's totally authentic. He's willing to go there. He's somebody that I admire. Just in how he sees the world, and I've been fortunate to meet him a few times, so I know that it's authentic. So that was really inspiring. I haven't read Cast yet, but that's next on my list. Charlie read that. My wife Charlie has been recommending that highly, and that's next on my list would be Cast.
Yeah, I know one of the things I think would be good for me, and I probably, other people like me who always, when I read, I'm reading whether it's business or leadership or personal development and health and wellness, that I really think I probably need to include a little more fiction.
I was just going to say that because it's so funny. Years ago, like Van and I have competing libraries, right? And I love reading about business and biographies and nonfiction. And this was before I was married. I was dating this woman, and she came to my house for the first time. She was looking through my library, and a few days later, she brought a stack of books, and she said, "I'm going to teach you how to read." And they were all nonfiction.
They were all nonfiction. Yeah.
I should say.
Yeah.
There's you want to get lost in a story as well.
Yeah.
And I think there's so much to learn from those kinds of stories rather than I spend so much.
And there's so many people's stories. It's not just fiction. It's nonfiction, right, but it's their story that you can glean so much, value out of. So I'm gonna. I think we. Go ahead.
I said I'm done with leadership and management books for a few months. I think. I think there is so much to be learned by, like, even watching Netflix now. I watched The Crown. Charlie and I watched The Crown. Shit, I learned so much about history that now it was so well done, and now I want to study more about the history of it.
Yeah,
because it's based on true facts, right? So I think it's
another good one. If you don't want to read about leadership, but you want to be entertained by it, the Ted Lasso is really good for kind of a fresh look at how to lead and how to be in empathy. So,
Yeah, that's great.
so in wrapping up our conversation, I wanted to, we have our feeling brain really moves a lot faster than our thinking brain. So I think that we probably, because we've had so much feelings and our feelings have been so escalated, that maybe we need to practice, and it's another word for mindfulness, and practice pausing. And I trust that a lot of people have practiced pausing in this last year. And what the it's been a great benefit and value of pausing. And so how do you feel like you've done a lot of pausing over the last year?
Yeah, I think, I think people get hung up on, that it would take too much time to get into a mindfulness habit or whatever it might be. Mine is really simple. I spend 2 to 3 minutes every morning pausing, right? Pause for pause. And what I do is I imagine I've got this bowl in my pelvic area, right? And for just 2 or 3 minutes, I breathe everything that the universe has to offer me for love, light, joy, abundance. And I bring that through my crown chakra. I fill this bowl up with white light. And while I'm doing that, I have a simple mantra, and it's I promise myself to live in joy. I promise myself to share love. I promise myself to be a daymaker. I promise myself to live in joy. I promise myself to share love. I promise myself to be a daymaker. And I fill myself up, and it literally 2, 3 minutes, and all of a sudden this white light is just emanating all over the place, right? And I'm in this state then of being able to give that light away. And you've probably heard this before, but I think it's so important that when you're giving, right, that you're that mindful that you're not doing it in a palm up way. People give if they get the tip. They do it if you'll be their friend. There's conditions attached to giving, right? But when you fill yourself up in that way and you give, it's not about thinking what you're going to do today. It's thinking what you're going to be today.
How
If
you're
you're
going
going
to
to be
be.
a daymaker, then you go and you give palm down. Many times it's anonymous. It's like pulling over on the street and giving a $5 bill out, or I have a box of nutrition bars in my car that I try to gift out, and it's you give palm down, and all of a sudden you harvest light. You don't get depleted, you harvest it, right? So I think, every time that I give palm down, it is taking that pause and just going, wow. And it's not mindful, it's almost mindless.
Yes.
You give in a way that is just your natural way of being. And oh my God, it's those moments, they're perfect moments. When you give that way and it's like it's perfect. And all of a sudden those perfect moments turn into perfect afternoons. Perfect afternoons become perfect days. And all of a sudden you find yourself living your life as a daymaker.
That's beautiful. I love that. I love your, because we've all heard meditation, mindfulness, and I love the way you just articulated your practice.
No,
I love it. I love it.
there's not a right or wrong way to do it. There is a way
Yeah.
to, and that's my way.
Yeah, you just have to do something that fills you up and reminds you,
Yep.
that, yeah. So, well, I think that's a perfect place to,
We
to
got
complete
we
our
got
conversation.
yeah,
Well,
we
we
got
got
deep.
deep enough. I told you I wanted to go deep. And, but thank you. You gave us, some really valuable insights and direction and thinking and being. So, and you always do. So thank
Thanks,
you,
Deb.
David. I appreciate you
Thank
so much.
Me too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great to spend time with you.